11:30 in the morning on April 26, 1999. The timeline of events regarding the fatal incident involving television presenter Jill Dando became the primary focus of the Metropolitan Police. Operation Oxborough, as the inquiry was designated, began by reconstructing the final hours of the 37-year-old journalist with precise attention to geographical data and electronic records. To understand the context of the investigation, one must look strictly at the documented movements of the subject and the physical environment of Gowan Avenue in Fulham, West London. According to witness statements and telephone logs, the morning began in Chiswick at the residence of her fiancé, Alan Farthing. Records indicate the individual left this location shortly after 10 o'clock. She was operating a blue BMW convertible, a vehicle that would later become a focal point for witness sightings along her route. Investigators noted that her movements were consistent with a standard domestic routine. Receipts recovered during subsequent financial analysis placed the vehicle at a petrol station on the Great West Road, where CCTV footage confirmed she purchased fuel and milk. Following this, she proceeded to the Hammersmith area. A secondary transaction, record time-stamped at 11:27 at a stationery store, indicated the purchase of fax paper. These mundane acquisitions established a verified chronology that contradicted theories of a rushed or erratic schedule. From Hammersmith, the route led directly to Gowan Avenue, a street comprised of terraced housing typical of the Fulham area. Investigators noted that while visibility along the street was relatively open, the specific entryway to number 29 was partially obscured by vegetation. A shrubbery offered a degree of cover, an environmental factor later cited in reports as a critical element that allowed the person responsible to remain undetected by the general public until the moment of the incident. Upon arrival at approximately 11:30, the blue BMW was parked near the residence. The timeline established by the inquiry suggests a very narrow window of opportunity. It was determined that the individual exited the vehicle and approached the front door, carrying the items purchased earlier in the morning, along with a mobile telephone and keys. Witnesses in the vicinity provided the acoustic evidence that set the precise time of the event. Richard Hughes, a neighbor who was working on his own vehicle in a nearby driveway, reported hearing the distinct electronic chirp of the BMW locking system. Shortly thereafter, Hughes described hearing a sharp, loud sound, which he initially interpreted as a vehicle backfiring. He did not immediately associate the noise with a weapon discharge. Crucially, Hughes observed a male individual walking away from the vicinity of number 29 moments after the sound. This unknown male was described as walking briskly, but not running, exhibiting a composed demeanor as he exited the area. At 11:47, the emergency services timeline began. A neighbor, Helen Dobble, discovered the individual in the entryway of number 29. The transcript of the emergency call records the initial confusion, as the posture of the individual suggested a medical collapse. Emergency medical personnel arrived at 11:52, followed closely by the first responding officers. The initial assessment was complicated by the nature of the trauma. First responders treated the situation as a potential seizure before the full extent of the injury became apparent. The official determination of death was made later at Charing Cross Hospital at 1:03 in the afternoon, though forensic pathologists would later testify that the loss of life was likely instantaneous at the scene. Procedural challenges arose immediately. The preservation of the location was compromised due to the necessary attempts at medical intervention. As is common in acute scenarios, the priority of saving life overrode the preservation of forensic integrity. Consequently, potential footprint evidence or trace materials in the immediate vicinity of the entryway were likely disturbed by paramedics and police personnel. This degradation of the scene would later become a point of contention during the review of the forensic collection process. Despite the disturbance, specific physical evidence was recovered. Forensic technicians located a single 9mm cartridge casing near the doorstep. Analysis of the cartridge identified it as a 9mm short caliber round. Distinct markings indicated that the ammunition had been modified. Specifically, the cartridge casing showed signs of manual recrimping. This technical detail suggested the ammunition might have been reloaded or tampered with in a workshop setting rather than being standard factory issue. This anomaly suggested a perpetrator with specific knowledge of firearms mechanics, aiming to reduce the auditory signature of the device in a residential area. The pathology report provided further clinical details regarding the mechanism of the injury. The examination indicated a single contact wound behind the left ear, with a trajectory moving downward and to the right. The presence of propellant residue on the hair and skin confirmed that the weapon had been pressed directly against the individual when discharged. Procedural experts noted that the use of a contact shot, combined with the singular nature of the discharge and the lack of defensive wounds, suggested a targeted action executed with extreme proximity. The absence of theft, jewelry, and valuables remained on the person led detectives to rule out a burglary gone wrong early in the procedural analysis. As the investigation expanded, the major incident room processed over 2,500 statements. Theories regarding a connection to the individual's work on the program Crime Watch or geopolitical conflicts in the Balkans were investigated, but yielded no concrete links. By April 2000, 12 months after the incident, the focus of the investigation narrowed to a local resident named Barry George. Records indicate that George lived approximately 500 yards from the location of the incident and had a history of stalking behavior and an interest in weaponry. On May 25, 2000, officers executed a search warrant at George's residence. Among the items seized were undeveloped photographs of women in public, magazines focused on firearms, and a coat from Cecil G. This specific piece of clothing became the central pillar of the prosecution's case. The coat was submitted to the Forensic Science Service, where laboratory analysis revealed the presence of a single particle of firearm discharge residue in the internal pocket. At the time of the initial trial in 2001, this microscopic particle, less than 1/20th of a millimeter in size, was presented as a definitive link between the suspect and the weapon used in the incident. The prosecution argued that the presence of the residue, combined with the circumstantial evidence of George's location and behavioral profile, was sufficient for a conviction. The jury returned a majority verdict, and Barry George was convicted. However, the documentation of the case continued into the appellate courts. In the years following the conviction, the scientific consensus regarding firearm discharge residue shifted significantly. In November 2007, the Court of Appeal reviewed the forensic evidence. The defense argued that the single particle was insufficient to prove direct contact with a firearm, citing new protocols which highlighted the risk of secondary transfer. Procedural logs revealed that the coat had been placed on a mannequin that had previously been used to display other evidence, introducing a documented possibility of cross-contamination. The appellate judges noted that the probative value of the single particle was neutral. It could neither confirm nor deny participation in the incident. Consequently, the conviction was quashed and a retrial was ordered. During the retrial in 2008, the presiding judge ruled that the firearm discharge residue evidence was inadmissible due to its lack of evidential weight. Without the forensic link, and with no witnesses who could positively identify him as the individual seen leaving Gowan Avenue, the case relied solely on circumstantial timelines. The jury acquitted Barry George of all charges. The aftermath of the judicial process left the investigation in a state of stasis. Operation Oxborough had exhausted its primary lines of inquiry, and an internal review examined the potential for confirmation bias during the initial stages of the investigation. As of the current date, the file remains open the individual responsible for the loss of life at 29 Gowan Avenue has not been identified, and the modified firearm involved has never been recovered. The procedural records stand as a testament to the complexities of forensic interpretation and the high burden of proof required within the justice system.